Hello, welcome to another edition of the Willy Bragg Show. I'm your host, Willy Bragg. I am back. I did this video last night, and there was some glitches when I check back over. And when I do a video, I check back over and replay it. And when I was replaying it, there was some glitches in there that it just looked way less professional than I wanted to look. So I decided to delete it and to do a rebroadcast. So I'm basically going to do that, and it should be better. So we're going to discuss this whole thing with Caleb Maupin. Okay, Caleb Maupin. We know about what's been going on here with Caleb Maupin lately. And for those of you who don't know who Caleb Maupin is, Caleb Maupin he's a political activist. He started out, I heard of him about a decade ago. He started out in the Workers' World Party, even though it's never been my political cup of tea, Workers' World Party. I listened to some of his broadcasting back then, and he provided some interesting insights on police brutality and things like that, and kind of put a rest to the myth about so-called left-wing connections to Nazism and fascism. I mean, he did a very, very good job of doing that back in 2010, I believe it was. Anyway, and then I forgot about him just till about last year, and I started seeing him again online. And now he created this group called CPI, Center for Political Innovation. And there's been a lot of controversy around this Center for Political Innovation. But let's talk about the scandal, because I don't want to make this like this is a character assassination or a slam against Caleb Maupin, because I'm gonna tell you, I wasn't there. I'm not a member of Center for Political Innovation. It's personally what I'm not into. It's not my political choice, my political cup of tea, so to speak, within the left. So, as far as being there, I wasn't there. So it's not fair for me to go and make accusations about this person that everybody else is making, or slamming on this person. But I'm going to tell you what I think from an outsider's perspective, from my perspective, just as a lot of people who are not within that movement giving their perspective and take. Now, for those who were negatively impacted by Caleb Maupin, I feel for them, and my condolences to them. Now, as for Caleb Maupin himself, if the allegations are true, I hope he seeks help. Now, as I'm saying this, we don't know if it's true or not, one way or the other. Again, we're very quick to make a judgment. We're very quick to judge people, and he's controversial, and people want to project the worst into people. And I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty. I sure as hell don't know. And I'm speaking from a perspective of somebody who just doesn't know whether he's innocent or guilty, and that's where I'm speaking from. So, and I want to make that clear. Now, about the sexual harassment allegations, again, as I said, I was not there. I have no way of knowing if it's true or not. So far as I know, there's been no charges against him. And as far as him being a cult leader, well, I mean, I think it would be unfair to even compare him to someone like, I've heard people make a comparison to Jim Jones or Charles Manson. Come on now. I mean, who the hell did he murder? Who the hell did he convinced to commit suicide? I mean, same thing with Charles Manson. I mean, you can't compare him to Jim Jones of Guyana or Charles Manson. I mean, that's kind of fucked up. He's definitely, I know he's not guilty of that. So on that one, I will defend him there. I mean, that's crazy. Now, he's been called a neo-Strasserite or been compared to the new Lyndon LaRouche, or some people say, Lenora Fulani of the New Alliance Party. Y'all don't know what that outfit's about, because of his connections with Alexander Dugin. Now, the Alexander Dugin is a red flag for me, in a negative way, red flag. Again, I have something to say about that later on. I know that there are people within the bread tube that he has a problem with, and he thinks that the bread tube's been funded by the CIA. Now, as far as bread tube is concerned, okay, he's a part of bread tube. If you want to consider Caleb Maupin still on the left, Caleb Maupin needs to realize he's part of bread tube, and if you got a followership of over 20,000 people on, let's say, YouTube, and I think at last count, I think I saw 24,000. You're part of BreadTube, and so just I don't know. I mean, I know he's clashed with some people on BreadTube, which doesn't make him all that different. In my opinion. Doesn't make them all that different from the rest of YouTube commentators. I mean, you see the big wigs on the online left. You see Shank Ugert and Anna Kasparian battling it out with Jimmy Dore and vice versa all the time these days. I mean, and I don't. Again, how's that any different from what Caleb Maupin would say about, let's say, someone like Bosch, or for example, and. While Bosch's demeanor is okay, he's not exactly a paragon of virtue when it comes to civility. He does a lot of attack jobs against others on the left, and in a vicious way too. So, those who throw stones at glass houses, and and probably in some ways I'm going to be closer to a Bosch than I would be a Caleb Maupin, although I have I think he's fucked up in some ways too. I have a serious critique against Bosch as well, and I have a serious critique against everybody, a lot of the major players on the online left. And so, just even the people I like the most, I have some critiques. Nobody's perfect. So, I mean, I know that with the CPI, with this whole patriotism, socialism thing, I know that people like Jackson Hinkle, is connected with it. And with Jackson Hinkle, I am okay with Jackson Hinkle for the most part. And I make fun of anti-Russia hysteria, and I used to listen to him quite frequently. I don't listen to him to the level I used to because it's just a little too much praising of Russia for my take. I agree that the Ukraine are not the saints that the West paints them out to be. When you got neo-Nazis in Ukraine, you got in the military and ministers serving in the government, you got basically cracked down against political opposition within the Ukraine, and recently with the anti-union laws. And while people want to sit there and talk about Vladimir Putin and talk about how evil Vladimir Putin is, and he's no saint, Russia's got problems. Russia's got a serious cultural anti-Semitism problem. Russia's got a serious anti-LGBTQ sentiment problems, cultural problems. Ukraine's worse in that regard. Their anti-Semitism is far worse than Russia. Their anti-LGBTQ bigotry is worse. It's worse than sorry, my phone. It's worse than Russia. So two wrongs don't make a right. I oppose the Russian invasion, but I oppose the Ukraine government too. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on the side of peace. I'm on the side of both the people who are victims on both sides. And that's where I stand. But I am any positive sentiment I could have had toward Ukraine is being worn very thin by some of the really fucked up things coming out of the Ukraine right now. So, and that's where I'm coming from. Now, Haas from Infrared, the angry rants are funny. He's a smart guy. I'm just not a tanky. And same thing with Jackson Hinkle. He's a tanky. I'm not a tanky. And at the end of the day, Peter Coffin, I've listened to him for years. Even though he is a tanky now, Marxist-Leninist, he speaks like a social democrat, and he has the arty persona on his program that's relatable. So he's got some help with this CPI movement, and there are others out there and everything. As I said, with this Caleb Maupin himself, I've known people. I never met Caleb Maupin. I've known people who knows Caleb Maupin. The people that I know that knows Caleb Maupin are good faith actors. They're to my left. They have a slightly different politics than what I would have per se. Well, I mean, we will agree more than we would disagree. We have some roadblocks where we disagree, but we always disagree agreeably, if that makes any sense. And they're subscribers to this channel. One of them plans to be on this show eventually, and we're working on that right now. And that's going to be interesting dialogue when this person shows up on the show. So we're working on that right now. So, but this whole patriotism, the patriotic socialism thing, the objective of patriotic socialism is to try to kind of get away from the woke, liberal, lefty movement that the left kind of flock itself around, and they want to go and appeal to a more conservative crowd to kind of feed the whole movement, a conservative movement that socialism can be patriotic, and it comes from a historical context. I mean, national liberation movements. The Soviet Union, the Russian Revolution, basically was a national liberation movement for their people. I mean, self-determination. It wasn't a colonial movement but it was a movement for themselves. And they were very patriotic. The Soviets were always the Russian people. What made the Soviet Union? They were very patriotic. Same thing with China under Mao. It was a patriotic movement, and to some degree, it was anti-colonialist in nature. It was also, same thing with Vietnam, when they drove when it was French Indochina and they drove the French colonialists away. It was a liberation movement for nationalism. Same thing with Cuba and various other countries around the world. And it was based on a patriotism. People in Venezuela, for example, they're patriotic toward their society too. And that's what, and they're using that model. They're also kind of preaching an anti-woke ideology for the left. And what troubles me about that is that they are willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is something about overly sensitive cancel culture that is permissive on the left, the censorship brigade, things like of that nature. When the left used to be anti-censorship, and there's much less pro-censorship on the left than what the right-wing media and the mainstream media paints them out to be. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to preach a social conservatism, a piety within the left, in the context of CPI. Caleb Maupin's teaching things like saving yourself until you're married, for example, and everything. And then we find out about alleged sexual quirks that he may or may not have. And that's been found out on the right too in a lot of ways. But and I'm not saying that to be due to character assassination, but I'm just saying. Anyway. This whole patriotic socialism thing is to try to convince the right and even the center of this country that this movement is not there to destroy America and all this sort of thing. Now, I myself am not the most patriotic person in the world. I don't have a lot of love for the United States, but I don't hate the United States. I don't want it destroyed. I'm just not patriotic, and it's hard to love a nation which refuses to love its people back. And we have a lot of corrupt politicians from both parties that the first thing they're concerned about is basically serving the interests of their fellow people in the elite, the corporations, the media, the people that screwed people over from both parties, that divides us up with things like culture war narratives and all of that. The Democrats and the Republicans pretty much got the same donors. And when it comes to the two-party divide, both parties are horrible, but yes, the Republican Party at the end of the day, I'm going to say it, the Republican Party's worse. The Democratic Party are almost as horrendous. There's a small group of people who are Democrats who are trying to make a difference, but there's a thing called a brick wall, or there's a better analogy is the Lucy in football, the Lucy with the football effect within the Democratic Party when it comes to the left. The Democratic Party itself is the football. Lucy is the Democratic Party itself. The football is the achievement that's trying to be achieved by the left, and Charlie Brown is basically your Bernie Sanders and your squad trying to be a team player. And for whatever reason, Lucy always had that football out of the way, so Charlie Brown could never kick that football. That's the Democratic Party in a nutshell. And what to do about it right now, it's hard to say. It is hard to say. I will say this, that I do believe in voting third party as much as possible. But when you got a John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, and she live in Pennsylvania, I would urge people, let's say, to vote for John Fetterman and see what he can do. And if John Fetterman's a disappointment, then we'll take it to the next level. But that's just my take on that. Republicans, there's nothing Republicans can offer, nothing at all. So that's how I kind of see things right there. Now, this whole thing with allegations of flirtations with the far right, with regard to Caleb Maupin. Now, Caleb Maupin, he's been traveling around the world. And he's been to places like China. He's been to places like Iran and places like that, and Russia. Now, in Russia in particular, we know about the recent bombing in Russia, I guess in Moscow, where the daughter Alexander Dugin was murdered, and Ukrainian connection to that. Well, Alexander Dugin has friendly ties with Caleb Maupin. Now, for those who don't know who Alexander Dugin is, he was in the 1980s an anti-communist dissident within the what was the Soviet Union back then. He did prison time and everything. And when the Soviet Union ceased existing after 1991, he was by that time in a series of far-right organizations like PAMYAT, which was neo-Nazi in nature, and then by the time by the mid 1990s, he was working with people from the former not the Communist Party itself, but a breakaway group that was loyal to the concept of the old Soviet Union, what they call the Red-Brown Alliance in the new Russia under Boris Yeltsin at the time, and that's where the modern term Red-Brown Alliance comes from. And you've been hearing a lot about the term Red-Brown Alliance lately. Last few years, he's been associating with Dugin. Dugin has an economics that's to the left, but socially very reactionary. He's he's a Russian Orthodox fanatic. With due respect to Russian Orthodoxy itself, and this is not a slam on them, but an individual who has a fundamentalist interpretation of Russian Orthodox theology, in the same way in America that, let's say, somebody who goes and listens to John Hagee a little too much I guess he's an independent Baptist minister down in Oklahoma. I guess that's his denomination. But the point I'm trying to make is that you could say that he's his counterpart, but a friend of mine said he's more like a counterpart of Steve Bannon. So I would say maybe, now and I thought about it, I was like, that's correct too. So I would say that maybe Alexander Dugin is sort of like the American counterpart of if Steve Bannon and John Hagee were one person. John Hagee and Steve Bannon, with regard to Steve Bannon, he comes across with the populist right. Alexander Dugin also comes with the populist right. The difference between the populist right in Russia, in Europe, and other countries, maybe in places like that, and here in the United States, is this: at least in Europe, if they are fucked up, at least they have a economic populism. They're not as antagonistic toward labor unions. They're okay with universal health care. They're okay with the welfare state to some measure. That would be the difference between the populist right in those countries and the populist right here in America. Here in America, there's no such a thing as a populist right. Now, I have some well-meaning conservative friends who resent me when I say there's no such a thing as a populist right, but there really isn't. And the reason I say that is that in 2016, the closest thing there was to a populist right was Donald Trump, and I'm not saying this to praise him. He echoed themes that sound like it came out of some of the people that were in Europe. He was talking about making Obamacare better, things like that. He was talking about bringing the jobs back into this country, protectionist measures, outsourcing continue. Nothing was done about healthcare. He was receptive to the idea of universal basic income. I'll give him that. Things of that nature. The problem with Donald Trump's populism, where he may have been receptive to some populist themes, was that he was in the Republican Party. When you're in the Republican Party of George W. Bush and Dick and Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, Mitch McConnell, there's no way in hell that they're going to go and cooperate when it comes to things like protectionism, or expanding union rights, or even providing a public option for healthcare. You could just forget about it. They are drunk on Reaganomics, on crack. So there is no such a thing as the populist right in the United States, other than shitty culture war issues. And that is it. And while I'm not a practicing Marxist, Marx was correct in the context of America, where he says religion is the opiate of the masses. You could say that would apply to the Christian right. They sit there and believe these narratives by the Republican Party, and they follow the leader, and they believe all this narrative and they're nonsense, and they are just lockstep voting with the Republican Party, even though the Republican Party leadership don't exactly believe in all the 700 Club John Hagee garbage that's spewed out on these programs you see over there. But getting back to Dugin, Alexander Dugin has kind of an apocalyptic view of the world. He sort of imagined that basically that the West will collapse and the Russian Empire will be glorious again, almost kind of almost in a second coming of Christ sort of way. Almost not that different from evangelicals here in the United States, except that the evangelicals here in the United States are foreign policy neocons, and they want to do it through Bush Cheney foreign policy drone strikes and military invasions. And they, for some reason, think that when Democrats are in power, they're a bunch of pacifists and all of that. And I got news for them. No, they're not. No, the Democrats, for their own reason, keeps that shit going. And the anti-war movement, unfortunately, died with the election of Barack Obama in the year 2008. By January 2009, there was no anti-war movement left, really. So that's sad. That is really sad. But anyway, this movement, this marriage with Alexander Dugin is kind of dangerous because it sounds like CPI potentially wants to reach out to Trump supporters and absorb themselves within the movement, and I just don't see a very good outcome from my perspective. I think there are people in CPI that means well, and it could be that Caleb Maupin might even mean well with that, but I think it's a very, very bad slippery slope. And I myself just could not get enthused about the idea of this patriotic socialism, because it sounds just a little bit, it just almost sounds a little too much like National Socialism. And we don't want it to go there. And Alexander Dugin is rumored to be a serious anti-Semite. So, and where there's anti-Semitism, there's usually racism. And of course, the homophobia is there, and all the other hatreds and bigotries. It usually comes in one big bundle. When it comes to those on the extreme far right. I don't mean the center right. I don't mean the vanilla right. I don't even mean the really obnoxious, shitty Ted Cruz right. They're unpleasant, but they're not to that level. But they're not Richard Spencer, for example. But they're unpleasant. But you get into unpleasant territory here in America with, let's say, someone like a Ron DeSantis, which is a gateway to that section of the right. So, and I have to warn people, look at the strong arm tactics there in Florida, and this is why I kind of would caution people not to be too hung up on this sort of patriotic socialism thing. So anyway, we have a chat line here, and we'll talk about this here. And we have Harrison Clark. Video is looking good all in my end. Okay, I appreciate that. Dirtbag-Left. I caught a live one. Hey, Dirtbag-Left. I'm glad to see you here. Always enjoy chatting with you. Let's see. Sorry, Willie, I don't honestly care what Ukraine is doing. They are a democratically elected government. So is Russia. I mean, I would not vote for Zelensky if I lived in Russia. In Ukraine, I wouldn't vote for Putin if I lived in Russia. There's a lot of motherfuckers I would not vote for if I live in a lot of countries that have a democratic electoral system. But at the same time, I'm going to criticize who I'm going to criticize. I mean, Trump was democratically elected in 2016. 16. And Joe Biden was democratically elected in 2020. I better be careful with my words because I don't want YouTube to interpret what I'm saying, and they'll be like, he's questioning, and then pull the zap on me. I'm not engaging in any election conspiracy theory bullshit there. Yeah, I'm not. So let's see here. Let's see. Is this the guy that likes women spank him? Allegedly. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. That is what I'm hearing. And everybody, even if that's a fetish, everybody's got a fetish. I mean, you ought to hear what I have to say in private about the idea of AOC and Tulsi Gabbard and me in the same room. It's very hot. Let's see. I know he loves a good spanking, says Ray 87. Okay. Well, folks, that's pretty much what I have to say about that with regard to Caleb Maupin. And I want to make an announcement that hopefully soon, actually on September 12th, we're going to have Santa Claus of Alaska here on YouTube as the guest, the interview. Santa Claus was the man that ran in the special election for Congress. They have ranked choice voting, and he was like one of out of like 48 candidates, and he was able to come in 5th place, and with just $300 on his own. He's going to go and share his story with us all. So there is that as well. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yes. Bryson and Canna says he recognized that we're living in a unipolar world. Yep, it's very true. Let's see. Spice Hunt Master says, I totally want to interview Krampus. Oh, I get it. Yes. So anyway, that is what I got to say. As I said, we'll be interviewing Santa Claus on September 12th. I hope you all be here. It'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday. And so, be here and be on the chat line and greet Santa and all of that. Hopefully he'll run for an office in the near future. What else am I going to say? Yes, let me conclude by saying that if you like what you heard, press like and comment. And if you disagree, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the content on this channel or any other content I may have. Subscribe, as the First Amendment, as a elitist, it's my duty to inform you to create your own platform because we're all the muckrakers of our time. And we need to do that because we need to reject corporate media. Also, be sure to follow me on YouTube here. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you are a new subscriber here, thank you for subscribing to this channel. Also subscribe, follow me on Twitch. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Rumble. And I'm not really using Rumble a lot yet, but I will get the hang of it. And until next time, folks, I thank you for showing up, being patient with me, and I will talk to you all later. Y'all, take care. I conclude by saying to y'all, music.